Hi, everyone, and welcome to Book Date with 8, a CBS 8 book club where we showcase local authors and stories from around the county. For our second book, our team chose The Darkest White by Costa resident Eric Blehm. It's the story of legendary snowboarder Craig Kelly and his tragic death in 2003 following an avalanche in British Columbia. Joining us in the studio for Book Date with 8, our second ever pick, Eric Blehm. Good morning to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. An incredible book, and I'll start off by saying it's a nonfiction book, but it has elements that I think any fiction book has: the thrill, the suspense, like the build-up. So tell us at home, viewers at home, what the book is about.
It's really, in a nutshell, it's the story of a neighborhood kid who discovered an unknown sport and became a world champion, became the greatest snowboarder in the world at the time in the 80s and 90s, and then he decided he wanted to walk away from it all to kind of return to his roots in the backcountry. And by doing so, tragically, during training to become a mountain guide, he was killed in an avalanche, and a lot of questions remained. And I wanted to kind of tell the whole story of this icon who was really unknown to the current generation.
And there is still kind of a debate that is still ongoing as to the amount of risk that was taken when they went out on this expedition. I mean, it's a lot to undertake, the story of a legend, let alone his death. What was the research process like for writing this? Because we know how research dense it is. Tell us about how you did that.
Yeah, I was the editor of Transworld Snowboarding magazine out of journalism school. I was a local boy who went to Palomar College, got my degree in journalism at San Diego State, minor in outdoor recreation, and I kind of lived it a bit myself. My first snowboarding turns were on Palomar Mountain in the early 80s. So it was a long time ago that I got into the sport. And the research process was over the course of 20 years. I was at Craig's memorial service when he passed away in 2003 and started collecting information there. And then 15 years later, I really dove into it and went into my archives and interviewed more than 100 people, 300 hours of interview, countless emails, chats, you name it. Just a long process to try and tell the whole story. Did
you already know how you wanted to structure it in parts, or did that kind of come once you started writing?
Interestingly enough, Craig Kelly and I, we went snowboarding in Iran in 2000, and he actually wanted to write his own book at one point.
A memoir, right?
Yeah, a memoir type thing. And one of the things that he had said at the time, he was doing yoga, stretching one night, listening to Bob Marley, and he said, I don't know what Bob was thinking when he wrote roots rock reggae, but if I structured my book someday, the roots would be like my early years when I grew up as a latchkey kid, and the rock would be my rock and roll area where I was a superstar and really just on top of the world, but a lot of stress. And then the reggae, he said, that's where I'm right now. I'm trying to get into the backcountry and the groove of the mountains in the backcountry. So and I kind of had that inspired by Craig himself. And so that's what I stuck to. It's kind of a three-part book. The early years, his rock and roll era, all the way up to when he was trying to learn to become the first snowboarding mountain guide in the Canadian Avalanche Association, or Canadian Association of Canadian Mountain Guides.
Okay, perfect. And for people at home who want to grab a copy, they can get it online. They can go to various local bookstores. We're going to be bringing in our panel to ask you more questions in a bit. But tell people at home where they can grab a copy.
Anywhere books are sold. I'm lucky. It's in audio, it's in ebook, it's in hardcover, which it's great. It's got a nice 16-page color insert. So the hardcover is kind of going to be a collector.
That's right. I love it. I mean, all those pictures inside, they also really align well with the story that you're telling. So there are some that, you can directly go to and see the actual picture of what you're telling us about.
Right.
And then on top of that, you have many other books as well, too.
I do. A lot of military books. Fearless is my biggest, most well-known book, the story of Adam Brown. The last season was the story of Randy Morganson, who went missing in Sequoia Kings Canyon. The only thing worth dying for about the first Special Forces team into Afghanistan. I was one of the early reporters to interview Hamid Karzai face-to-face. And I was actually my interview was sandwiched between Sarah Palin and Condoleezza Rice as an unknown guy. And Karzai and I started talking in his room. He was getting ready to speak for I can't remember what exactly, a big event. And he made Condoleezza Rice wait.
Well, see, and that's why we love bringing you in here, is because you know the journalism route, the reporter route, and you cover it so well in covering Craig's life. We have a lot more to come. We're going to be bringing the panel in, so that's all going to be coming up after the break. A panel of readers from the book club. We have Ned Ranpor coming, and our friends from Warwick's as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone. We are about to get all of our questions answered, and we are joined by our very own Ned Ranpor, as well as Julie Slavinsky, Director of Events at Warwick's in La Jolla. Welcome, you two, both readers of The Darkest White.
So good.
I feel like we all were gripped while we were reading it. When we were in commercial, we were talking a little bit more about just the kind of risk that people take on when they're doing these kinds of expeditions, going from resorts to backcountry to, helicoptering in. You've done this yourself. You've gone on these types of trips.
Yeah.
Did it feel like you were kind of assessing your risk while you were doing it? Do you still do these types of expeditions?
When I can. Life's a little different right now, but no, I absolutely love the backcountry, and that's honestly where Craig and I kind of bonded and had our friendship. Craig was a big reader. He loved books. He loved the backcountry, and that's kind of where our paths intersected. But there is the ultimate, I think, for any snowboarder or skier that loves powder is get in a helicopter and have that be your chairlift or a cat. And it's magical, but there's always that underlying dragon under the snow that keeps it always, it keeps you coming back, but it keeps you you're a little gripped, at some point. So you really have to be careful. And that's what I really wanted to kind of go over in the book, to let people understand the draw and the pull to this, the siren call of the powder, but also that underlying risk it's always there.
Mm-hmm. I know there was a few parts of the book where you described the way that Craig would snowboard. And one of it, if he wrote it like he always did, he slashed every snowdrift with style and aired every powder pillow, probably casually head dipped a branch or two. I'm like picturing that and feeling the feelings that I would imagine it'd be like out there, thanks to the way you really beautifully wrote this. What do you hope people gain from that? I know there is obviously the danger, like you mentioned, but I mean, is this a book that you hope people kind of learn that, hey, you can enjoy nature this way and still go out there and experience these life-changing moments?
Craig loved the backcountry, but he loved just being on snow. A lot of people will ask me on the hill, like, I'm a snowboarder, my wife's a skier. My son snowboards, my 2 daughters ski. And to me, just being out there in nature and in the snow, and something that's fun, is just so special. And by describing it in that way, I mean, Craig was all about the feeling. People would try and say, what do you want to focus on? What's the best thing I could do to become a professional and become a world champion like you were? And one of his classic questions was, I'd focus on the feeling. And it's just that's Craig Kelly. He was so much about that. And he would milk terrain, every little terrain feature, just to the end, to the last, till gravity runs out. He would be working the terrain, and because he loved it. He really, truly loved it. And so do I.
So I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit, to the beginning part of your research and everything. And so the core about it is pushing the edge a little bit to what the sport became, the camaraderie, the people that were, who you're doing this with, and the entrepreneurial feeling of it. Do you sense that Craig missed the spirit of that? And is that why you think he stepped away?
Being lucky enough, fortunate enough to be at the cusp of this sport myself and Craig, when, you would go to the mountains and, like, first of all, the local mountains here, Snow Summit did not allow snowboarding. Bear Mountain did not allow snowboarding for a long time. The first place that allowed it was Snow Forest, a little one-lift area. And you would show up and you would see somebody and there'd just be this wave. Everybody, you were a family. In the beginning, could you imagine surfers out there pulling up to a surf break and being excited? Now you'll see a car pull up and you're like, oh no. Another crowd, or they'd bring their own crowd and you'd be like excited because you really were looking for other people and you wanted to see what gear they were riding. And Craig was the epitome of that. He was like such an ambassador where he not only encouraged people to come do it, but he also tried to teach the kids that were, a lot of this came, skateboarders from the urban world transferred into the snow, into the mountains. And so there's this urban mentality that they didn't understand a lot of the etiquette of the old school skiers. And so there was this clash early on. I mean, snowboarding was voted the worst new sport in 1988 by People magazine. And Craig kind of wanted to just dispel that because, one, he was beautiful to watch on the snow. By watching him carve down the mountain, it was like a dance. And he would encourage, a lot of people would say that Craig converted so many skiers just by letting them, just when they watched him come down the mountain. They're like, I see how beautiful this is. And that's very true.
You mentioned one of the articles that I think called it like a rage of hormones or something, like what snowboarding is.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea, as someone who skied for the first time about 10 years ago, that this is a relatively new sport. And
very new.
Like, it was interesting for you to describe that a lot of the people who got into it were the ones that didn't want to be taught by, you know, the older people who feel like they were almost like critiquing them. The younger people felt like they were learning alongside like actual mentors who were doing it with them, who were in their 20s and 30s. You know, like it was fun to see this picture of Craig painted that just showed what a lively guy he was, what a fun guy he was. They're getting into a bit of trouble at times, but good trouble, right? So, you know, it was interesting. Tell us about the research that you did into Craig's, you know, growing up and upbringing.
Well, I mean, he was a divorced, he was a latchkey kid, a product of divorced parents, and he was a kid who was kind of on his own. His dad had a moving company. There were times when he was left alone for weeks, one time for almost a month at a time, when his brother and baby sister was with his mom, and that was his choice. So he was very much into that independent life, which lent well ultimately to these independent sports. He was a team sport guy. He was very competitive, and by looking back into his history, it was the era of E.T. and all the kids riding around on their bikes, BMX bikes. He was a BMX racer, and he was also smart. One time, his points were added up incorrectly by the ABA, and I got to see the letter, his handwritten, cursive, perfectly written letter where he said, "I believe that you tallied my points wrong. Could you please retally them and double check?" And then the next month or whatever, they were tallied correctly. He had the right number plate. Wow. I mean, he advocated for himself, and ultimately that made him such a great guy because he advocated for the sport. And again, with that cerebral nature, you know, he was a chemical engineering major at the University of Washington. He walked away from a degree in chemical engineering, 2/4 shy of a degree, to go and pursue professional snowboarding in a sport that didn't even exist.
Right.
So he had confidence in also the sport because he knew how fun it was and he knew where it would go, but also in himself because he could out-train anybody. Right. He brought discipline to the sport.
And I think people should know at home, too, that are watching this, the amount of research that you put in. I mean, we're journalists. It's impressive. So impressive. I mean, I can't imagine the number of people you talk to. They let you in. I mean, you know, this is the man's life that obviously we know the ending ended tragically, but they still wanted to share his story with you, and you were able to, you know, obviously build their trust where they felt comfortable doing that. How were you able to get all of this information on his life and, unfortunately, the ending, too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was an editor of Transworld Snowboarding magazine. I wanted to be a professional snowboarder at one point, and this is kind of a circuitous route to that question. But after 9/11, I kind of asked myself, what's my part in all this? I was an adventure journalist and doing these things, and I thought, what's my part? And I wanted to tell the stories of those who served, because I had never served my country. And so by telling those stories, it was kind of, I believe, training up to come back full circle to snowboarding and tell this ultimately, because I've told stories about, you know, Adam Brown in my book, Fearless, a crack addict who turned his life around and rose to Tier 1 SEAL Team 6, one of the first big friendly fire incidents in Afghanistan after 9/11, in The Only Thing Worth Dying For. So I've done those stories and tried to really celebrate the legacies of heroes. And by doing that, I talked to a lot of parents of young men who had passed. And I think that if you're sincere and you just say, I want to tell the whole story, because I think that that's how you can honor anybody in a situation of you know, premature, you know, early deaths and things like that in these heroes, is they want the truth told. They don't want it candy coated. They don't want it, you know, covered up. They want accountability. If you're at that level, you appreciate that. And so I just laid it out to everybody. And I ended up speaking to almost every single survivor on the record of this gigantic, very horrific avalanche, one of the worst avalanches in North American skiing and snowboarding history, just by doing that, just saying, hey, I want to tell the story. I want people to learn from this.
And the number of people you interviewed, over how long did it take?
Well, I sat in Craig's memorial service in 2003, and I actually recorded all the stories, hundreds of stories, until my batteries ran out, literally, in 2003. And then I put it all in a box, and I wrote a few, tribute stories for magazines like Outside, Transworld Snowboarding, Couloir magazine was out then. And then years later, I have to say, I was in a lift line 15 years after Craig's death. And everybody, when he passed away, would put these stickers on their board that said, Craig Kelly is my co-pilot. Yeah. And I was in a lift line at a little ski area in Utah, snowboarding with my family. And this kid in his 20s looks over at my board and says, who's Craig Kelly? And I just thought, like, he's being forgotten to this new generation. And that's what made me come home, dig into my archives, found this cardboard box that said Craig. And I had all of the old stories, and ultimately the coroner's report and the investigation of this avalanche and this flood 15 years later came back to me, my friend, and this hero, this legend. And I wasn't really clear on what had happened that day. Nobody was. And that's what really encouraged me to dive deep, to tell the whole story. Because when someone passes away, a lot of times you want to celebrate their life, and you kind of gloss over their death. Right. In this place, I thought that was important. Let's find out what happened.
As Netta said, we know the ending, it's a tragic ending, but even though you're writing, I still found myself rooting at the end for a different ending.
Yeah.
So what was the most difficult part to write about in this book?
The end. I knew I was going to have to go there, down through those layers of snow into that darkness. The darkness of the unknown, You're buried by snow, you're waiting for rescue. At some point, you're going to pass out. I wanted to understand what your body goes through. And, people have had them in, like, The Perfect Storm, they talk about drowning. I wanted to show what happens, how your cerebral cortex kicks in. And I found proof of, like, near-death experiences and things like that. I wanted to get an idea of what Craig went through. And it had to have been the most horrifying moments of his life and the others. 7 people died that day, 6 others with him. And I think the book was late with my deadline, because in some ways, I didn't want to go there.
I was going to say, did you have to step back?
I had to step back and try and just distance myself because it was tough, and I knew the place in life that he was in. He was a recently a new father, and he was kind of at this point where he was up there in the mountains learning how to be safer, which makes it all the more tragic, almost like Shakespearean tragic, and. So going down into the snow and letting myself go there to those moments and try and get to that point of view, but also be respectful to the family. You want them, they've been through this themselves. They've gone through this in their minds. And, there's that line you have to draw between being respectful to those who loved Craig and family and friends, and getting the story out. So I just wanted to get as deep and as raw as I could, so people will also learn and think twice. Like, if I'm going on this run that's potentially sketchy, maybe they're going to think twice after reading this book.
Right. Do you feel like you answered, because there still is that ongoing debate as to whether or not it was safe for them to be there, whether or not it felt like guides had just ignored warnings. Do you feel like you answered the question as to whether or not that was a safe place for them to be?
I think I laid it out very clearly. I wanted to, in the past, let's be honest, these people were led to this slope by highly trained certified guides. Right. Guide Rudy Beglinger, the lead guide, and Ken Wiley, the assistant guide. And in some ways, any accident like this, in hindsight, it's easy to be a armchair quarterback,
exactly.
And look back and say, well, they could have gone here, or this could have done here. And I thought, as a journalist, the way I can really cover it is try and let the readers understand what was going on in the minds of these individuals leading these groups, show the tests and the things that they used to figure out that skill level, or not the danger or the risk level, and then readers can kind of put themselves in the boots of those on the ground. And then the people who followed, many of them were very trained as well, yet they follow. Right. And that group dynamics is really fascinating. And I think that it's kind of like having a front row seat to an expedition, like an Everest expedition that goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And by talking to so many of the survivors and reading notes from them that they wrote that night and interviews that no one has ever seen before. So it's not like I'm relying on 20 years memories. Right. I had a lot of stuff that was taken right then and there that they were really this far removed, they were willing to share with me.
And they still held on to.
And they held on to, because there was also personal guilt. A lot of them had some premonitions, as we know. One guy didn't want to go. He was frozen, but he couldn't quite understand why. Mm-hmm. I'm getting chills on the back of my neck just remembering this. And another one who halfway up realized I shouldn't be on this slope and wanted to just start booking to get to the top. Yeah. And I think that it's just by going as deep as you can with that. I interviewed more than 100 people, 300 plus hours of interviews, countless everything else. So to get to that point, I feel very confident that the reader can make their own decision. Yeah. Because as a journalist, I don't want to be the one telling them. Right. Maybe in a year after this book's been out a year, a lot of controversy. I've got a lot of, a lot of praise for it, but I've also gotten a few people that are like, wait a minute, what about this? Why didn't you do this? And controversy makes it an interesting and a real story. So it's in there. It's like a thriller. It really is.
I kept picturing the movie version of this. I just want you to know. And there's moments, obviously, you take us through the suspense and the rescuing of the people that were still, underneath all that snow. And as you were telling that, there was a part in this that made me bawl my head off. I just want you to, I was on an airplane, people around me, what is wrong with this girl? But it was very emotional. And I think the timing of it, too, just kind of brings you through these waves of emotions. But it was when you're talking about him and his wife and newborn daughter, and you said, this was at the end, as we know the avalanche had happened, he was looking out the hospital window over the expansive blue of the ocean when Olivia began to stir. Then you went on to say, he picked her up, settled into the recliner, kicked off his shoes, so you can picture all of this. When Olivia faded back to sleep, opened his journal. Sav is sleeping, he wrote, my feet are propped next to her and Ollie fills my lap with quiet, snoozy love. Thank you, God, namaste, I'm a grateful and happy man. Which, the feelings just came out. And you mentioned the family, his, wife and daughter. I just kept thinking of them as they're reading this. I hope that brought them that feeling that he loved them so much.
Yeah, I do too. And it's really hard for people involved like that. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't know if they were able to even read those last pages at the end. And that's when he's under, and the book kind of, the hook to that line is in the beginning of the book. They're on this trip where they took this trip down, they drove from Alaska to the tip of South America and she became pregnant on the way, and then she had the baby in Chile. And so this is a whole startup, and at that beginning when Olivia, their daughter, is born, I write that scene and say, he kicks off his shoes and the diary's there, and he said, it's a good time to write. And I leave the people hanging. That's the end of that chapter.
What did he write?
And then at the very end, when he's on the snow, we understand that there's a life review process. I went into a study that was done on people in near-death experiences and people who've had heart attacks, oftentimes with a lot of carbon monoxide in their blood, which is very common with a heart attack, but also very common in avalanche, because when you're encased in snow, you're rebreathing. You come in an ice mask and you rebreathe that, so you get a lot of carbon monoxide. That kicks in your cerebral cortex, which studies show from people who have survived these near-death experiences, they have this warmth of emotions, kind of like your life flashing before your eyes. And so in that, they said oftentimes people go back to emotional moments in their life with ones they love. And I could only surmise. Yeah. But there's no doubt in my mind that when he's there waiting a rescue and ultimately passes out, that he's going to go to Olivia and Savannah. Yeah. And that's why I thought that was a very appropriate place to put that. And I knew when I read it, after pouring through his diaries and journals, when I read that line, I knew immediately that's going to be in the book. Right. And I knew that 3.5 years before I finished.
Wow, wow. Amazing.
A lot of people have questions, and we, of course, have so many more that we could go through. But I do want to mention that at Warwick's, you guys have a ton of local authors all the time. We found out about this book through you at Warwick's. So remind people at home about Warwick's and where they can go for more info.
Warwick's.com, which is our website that you can see all the wonderful events that we do. And also local authors that we have host a lot all the time. So
Warwick's is one of the last survivors, and have been around for so long that you supported me with The Only Thing Worth Dying For, and I just, to have a bookstore like that local within driving distance is such a blessing. And I just, I always like to tell people, if you like to go and walk through the aisles of a bookstore, support them.
That's right.
Because they are disappearing at an alarming rate.
If people want to follow you and your journey, you're on social media. But do you have a website too people can go to?
Yeah, just ericblehm.com.
There you go.
And if you spell Blehm wrong, B-L-E-H-M, if it's B-L, I think you'll still find it. But everywhere, social media, it's the world we live in. So all social media.
Well, we appreciate you making the time to come out and talk to us. We love getting to kind of go in depth more about these kinds of books. So
it's an honor.
We appreciate it.
It's an honor to share Craig's story.
Absolutely. And you too. We love having you both. Thank you, Netta, for reading it with us. We love it. Netta, I'm not joking. We read this in different timetables. She read it first, and I read it after her. And leading up to it, she was literally coming into work every day, being like, "You need to start this." It's great. So this has been amazing. Stay with us. We have much more after the break. We're going to be announcing our next book club pick, but we'll be right back after this. And we want to thank you for joining us for our second ever book club meeting. If you want to get in on the continuing discussion of The Darkest White, you have a place to go. Eric Blehm will be at Warwick's later on this month. You can join him in person and the team at Warwick's. The event is on Wednesday, June 26th. It's at 7:30 p.m. And get this, it is free and open to the public, but you can reserve a spot by purchasing the book on Warwick's website. And it's a good idea to do so. Sometimes those events do fill up. So grab a copy, go and get it signed, talk to Eric himself. Those events at Warwick's are all very fun. Now we want to announce our next book club pick. A very exciting time for us. Our third ever CBS 8 Book Date with 8 pick is Rouge by Mona Awad. The book is set in La Jolla and tells the story of a lonely young woman who's drawn to a cult-like spa in the wake of her mother's mysterious death. You can keep up to date with the latest on cbs8.com/book club. You can also find out how to get a copy of your own of that next book club pick and the dates on when we're going to be meeting with Mona herself. We appreciate you joining us for this discussion. We hope you all have a fantastic day.